reading, everybody.
It's great. I hear so much about the Exeter program.
Yeah.
Everyone's just like,
Before I forget to tell you, when the reading is over, there are some delicious cupcakes to be shared back there. And there are also copies of this new book, Field Notes on Ordinary Love, which is really a beautiful production from Copper Canyon. And I can't wait. I've got my copy signed, so I know that Keith will be happy to sign for everyone if everyone buys a book. So let's make that happen. Before I give you the formal introduction, let me use this as my public chance to thank Keith for serving as this year's Kenyon Review Fellow in Poetry. Keith has really been an outstanding part of the family. He came in just filled with energy and insight and poetic verve, and has been a joy for I think everyone in the community. It really has been extraordinary that way. I don't know if you know this. You're only the second male Kenyon Review Fellow we've had, but you've been one of the two best. I'm only sorry that he and our other fellow haven't gotten along very well. But other than that, it's been easy. But I'll just repeat the thanks one more time. This is hard. It's hard to find people to come in and play this role, to be teachers, to work with the Kenyon Review, to be part of the community in such a positive way. And Keith has really been exemplary, and I'm very, very grateful to him for doing that. Keith S. Wilson, our 2018-2019 Kenyon Review Fellow in Poetry, is an Affrilachian poet, Canem Fellow, game designer, which is what all the students now want to be, and graduate of the Callaloo Creative Writing Workshop. He holds an MFA in poetry from Chicago State University. He has received 3 scholarships from Bread Loaf, as well as scholarships from MacDowell, UCross, Millay Colony, and the Vermont Studio Center. Keith serves as assistant poetry editor at Four-Way Review and digital media editor at Obsidian Journal. His work has appeared or is appearing in Poetry, Adroit Journal, Crab Orchard Review, Narrative, 32 Poems, Blueshift Journal, and Vinyl. He is the author of the chapbook Generation Oz, Finishing Line Press in 2011. His debut collection, Field Notes on Ordinary Love, explores love, violence, isolation, and enduring uncertainty. Publishers Weekly calls his collection romantic yet world-weary, bereaved but fortified, a kindred reflection of the heart in the modern world. Please join me in welcoming Keith Wilson.
Thank you all for coming. Yeah, this is like, I will admit I'm super nervous for a few reasons. One is it's so much easier to read in front of just like total strangers. And so it's also amazing to read in front of like so many people who I have gotten to know here, and my students and my friends. But it's also a little nerve-wracking. So hopefully I will do well. I will do my best. I want to thank the Kenyon Review for everything, for having me as a fellow. I want to thank David Lynn. I want to thank Elizabeth Dark for putting this together, especially like on pretty late notice, and Misha Rai, my sister at arms, and my friend who has helped me through everything, through teaching and talking about publishing and the project that we're working on, just so many things. Yeah, I'm gonna read from the sort of color-coded right before this. There's sort of like 3 big groups of poems. I'm gonna read between them. So there's a lot of love poems, but there are also some poems about family and politics, and then I have a lot of poems about Greek myth too. So we're gonna move between them. I'm gonna start this with a poem called Tercets. This is one of the love poems. Love, it's only gotten worse. My father can't stop saying your name like a war his nation lost, or a miracle that saved him from an undertow. Unprompted, you rise like a body from a lake before dinner. Grace has never been more biblical than in the gasp about your name, the quiet being the inverse of a heartbeat I depended on, a season for which there is no dress. And I say yeah, Dad, but you love are a tragedy in my father's eyes. My reflection having just shaved, my skin is tender. I say before he can say, I remember, yes, she was just like that. I cannot change, that I remember, my love I swallow, my hands, every day taking the place of your hands on the table. So I'll read a poem called A Short List of Grievances, another love poem. First, you are invisible, which is another word for Jesus, she's gone. Second, the medulla oblongata makes you automatic, so even when I am not thinking of your hips, I am thinking of your hips. The dreams I have dreamed of being loosed like a sparrow would pronounce themselves into wilder dreams if I were a bird already. I would have to eat nothing until I was thin as the air and I'd baffle the moon, my simple machines turning the mobile in the sky. I could be ready, heave and release, only the nothing of a bird. Third, you are right. I'm cabinetry. I'm a man that needs to know conclusively that he is empty. Your name, you know, is a midnight call. I am talking too much about air and hardly about breath. Who do you think really makes me lift my chest? This should be simple, but it never is. Consider the wing, to which the burden of air becomes the burden of flight. This next one is a poem that maybe I've read here. I don't remember which poems I've read here, actually. But I think I've read this here before. This is a poem about my dad and about the complicated ways that masculinity is sort of passed on and inherited. It's a poem called The Way I Hold My Hands. I can't imagine my father wishing he would rather be anything. Once upon a time, he was a watermelon growing from a box. His mother died. His father beat the blush out of him, and teardrops dripped black from his face into his food. My father's father made him eat his dinner through himself, the Miracle Whip salad spangled like the garden in dew. This isn't a figure of speech. My father ate his blood. It's hard to think he must have been young. He made me stop all my life. He told me not to be a girl. Whatever I was doing, of course, I stopped. He kissed me on the top of the head before I went to bed each night. He was always there. He read to my brother. He read to me from a book of animals. This is a fox's paw. This is a bear's. He told me, I'll give you something to cry about. He never touched me. Bear claw, I said. Winters are easier for bears. I spread my fingers over his. No, my father said. So I have a lot of poems. I don't read from them as often for whatever reason, but I have a lot of poems that are in the voice of Greek mythological creatures. Once upon a time, or early in the draft of this, the whole book was going to be nothing but stories told from the monsters of Greek mythology. I was super obsessed with that, and I still have a lot of those in this book, and I still kind of write them, so they'll probably just appear for the rest of my life. But one of the creatures, monsters, whatever, that I'm especially interested in is Minotaur, because I see him as sort of a biracial, Greek myth, basically. And so I have a lot of poems in the voice of Minotaur or about Minotaur. And this is a poem about being profiled going into stores, which in this case it happens at a convenience store, although it happens to me most often at Best Buy. So shout out to Best Buy. This is called Minotaur 16 enters a convenience store. This is Minotaur, his race, his name, brazenly alone. Left, right, left, right, left. He walks. Nothing amazing. Nothing worth reporting. Again he finds himself shadowed by a clerk. Now in the far corner of the store, or is he being too sensitive? He swells suddenly with hunger. Holsters the heft of his phone. His pockets bulge under the breath of the worker, bearded, who stalks beside him. Minotaur knows a man is always ready to take the good dare of a life. As simple as a pop, as effortless to pilfer as a carton of milk or OJ. A man's blood courses like this and wants. His fingers prick. More than anything, Minotaur wants to feel his fingers tingle. The moment a child disappears is never caught on camera. Only black and white. Only another evening, artful even, punctuated just by the silent hammer of a man's fearful eyes. Look here, boy. Minotaur can pull the hammer back. Look here. This is his hot breath, giving soul to the cooler's glass. O Asterian, try to live. Here, boy, is his heavy lead. Here's the gap in the hood of a savage jacket. Even the jacket wants to live. Maybe man is deadlier in fractions. Minotaur carries the 9, makes himself full. So I'll read another love poem. So this one's called Asterism. I can't remember the number, but there's like a specific number of constellations, and that's like all that exists and all that will exist. They're sort of like already established. And so if you ever look up at the sky and you see something, and sort of like group those stars into something, that's not a constellation, it's an asterism. So like the Northern Cross is an asterism. So this poem is called Asterism. It's funny to think now of that silence, with you at the desk reading, and me writing on the couch, separately, and the meaning of that nothing happening all around us still. Were you available now to hold my hand? Or if you continued to sit sometimes in this chair, tired of the world outside of us? Or if I any more wrote about possibilities other than this, or the curve of your nose, the bridge beneath my lips? That is, if the silence of the two of us were predicated by my being able now to reach you, how that quiet, that night, in this room, might seem a comfort. But instead of that, the candles between, and neither of us with anything in particular to say. The quiet trembles, because your voice isn't a feather I can hold, but a thought I draw across my throat when I close my eyes. I'm trying to say that, though the mass of the absence is already gone, a world revolves around it, still. The two of us, who try to speak like stars that cannot be heard because of all the things they say of space. So this next poem I'm going to read is, sort of became the title of this book. It's called Field Notes. And when I first started trying to write this poem, it began as sort of like an exercise in the word black, sort of like Maggie Nelson did with blue. But I was like really interested in all the different meanings that black has. And so that sort of just became like a whole big collection of notes, and more I changed things around and moved them and cut them out. And I realized that it was specifically about like a lot of different things that happened in a number of different fields in Kentucky, which is where I'm from. So this is called Field Notes. In physics, dark matter isn't made of anything. It's a free citizen that passes, unburdened, through the field, through itself, through you. 2. It helps to observe from a distance, the field, for instance, as a statement the South has chosen to make. The way whiteness, too, is often rhetorical, as when an older student remarks, in those beginning days, that only he observed MLK's holiday, while his black friends, working, did not. 3. Sometimes love is a black dot in a field. Sometimes, suddenly, it is not. 4. Or how can black be the absence of all color? Take this cruiser. See the light strike blue off the car like copper through a fountain. 5. There's a difference between what is fair and what is just. For instance, it is fair that I try to love your skin, even when it is not touching my own. 6. Whiteness is an alibi. The way the officer was like a steam engine only I could see. 7. Inside, where nothing shows, I am of course not black, but that does not matter to the field. 8. Some colors are indistinguishable at night. Put your hands behind your back, a different cop once asked me. It was so sincere, he was so polite. 9. As a boy, you learn to know the inside without being required to feel it, as when, now, I understand a bucket or a hood. 10. He asks my girlfriend, not if she is white, since even in this light what we are is obvious, but instead he speaks philosophically. Ma'am, he asks, are you here of your own free will? 11. Sometimes whiteness is a form itself of hyperbole. Try this. Sit in a field. Then try reading Andrew Jackson's quotes on liberty. Only pretend they are being written by his slaves. 12. Look at the word black on the paper, and you will see a definite black, a kind, a certainty, or if you see nothing at all, that of course is a kind of black too. 13. By the road, my father showed me cotton once. Look at that, he said. I have a few poems that are ekphrastic, so they're like in response to or a description of paintings at the in Chicago. I would go to the museum all the time and look at the paintings there. So a lot of these are sort of impressionistic, and this one's about a painting called the Flores Rapers. Whatever they say of the heart, the truth is this. We embody our hands. Every morning I have my look at them, my hands cupping my face, a bowl of water. What will I make of these pliers, this filigree of clams? I love how the light lollops from knuckle to knuckle like a fox across a lake. What is the rest of me but a daydream of angles? What but a happening of curves? When I am freest, when I am at peace, it is only the light making palatable my hands. In a grasp, in a reach like this, as when a man offers his an extension and becomes before me a basilica, and I watch the gleam of the fish-throated muscles of the back, the narrow bones and knees, and I say again, the knuckles, each a chamber for a whole religion performed by the hands. Hands doing, possessing, and pressing firmly to the ground to scrape. If you've ever taken the dark meat from a thigh bone by your teeth, like that. And his back is a crowbar for the actions being completed by the palms of him, his intersections, the fingers lolling over each other like men on a rocking train. And I see the light and the labor both, and the ordinary somersaults of the rib cage and viscera, they say the heart. But I see the fingers motioning like this too, and my own hand curled like a conversation made after light has ceased to bluster in the caverns of the eye, and sits thick and pleasant as a man having worked himself religious. Again, they say the heart. What time is it? How much time do I have? I'm going to read 2 more. So I'm going to read a poem. Which one should I end on? I'm going to read a love poem, and then I'm going to read a poem about pigeons that I've read before. I'm going to end on the pigeon poem because it's like the most clearly optimistic poem in this. I think there's like optimism in this, but there's also like a lot of sadness. And the pigeon poem it has no sadness, I don't think. So I'm going to start with a very sad poem. So this is called Heliocentric. Yeah, it's one of my longer poems, and it has an epigraph from the Odyssey, which is, "If I beg and pray you to set me free, then bind me more tightly still." So this is when Odysseus was getting near the sirens. He asked his crew to tie him down. So Heliocentric. I'm striving to be a better astronaut, but consider where I'm coming from. The exosphere, a desk where the bluest air thins to a lip. Impossible to know the difference from where I sit and space. I promise I still dream of coming back to you, settling on your yellow for the kitchen. And we won't fight, not in this manifest, not over the crumpled bodies of laundry. We won't row over the nail polish, its color, the spilled sun. Inspiration is the deadliest radiation. It never completely leaves the bones. You know. From here, there are no obstructions but the radiant nothingness. An aurora borealis opens like a fish. This. To the pyramids, yes. To a great wall. And there you are, moving from curtain to curtain. Oh, to fantasize of having chosen some design with you. But the moon's over Jupiter. But asteroids like gods deadened by the weight of waiting. I remember you said pastel for the cabinet where the spice rack lives. That I ought to have picked you up flowers when I had a chance. Daisy, iris, sun, red roses, ultraviolet, the color of love. What else but this startles the air open like an egg? I'm really trying to be better, to commit to memory the old songs about the ground, to better sense your latitudes, see the corona of your face. Take your light as it arrives. Earth is heavenly too, but know that time is precious here, how wine waits years and years to peak. What is there to do? I've made love to satellites in your name. I'm saying I don't know when I'll return. Remember me, for here are dragons and the primitive song of sirens, stars that sway Elysian, ships that will not moor, lovers who are filled with blood and nothing further. Who could love you like this? Who else will sow you in the stars? Who better knows your gravity and goes otherwise to catastrophe? I've schemed and promised to bring you back a ring from Saturn, but a week passes, or doesn't manage. Everything steers impossible against the boundless curve of light. Believe I tried for you. Against space. Time takes almost everything away. To you. For you. A toast to everything incredible. I almost wish I'd never seen the sky when always there was you. Sincerely. So the last poem I'm going to read is not the only poem in this book about pigeons, but it's the only one with pigeons in the title. So when I lived in Chicago, I had a walk. I worked at a grocery store, and I had a walk that took me under the bridge that the L was on, and there's just like so many pigeons under there, and it was like my favorite part of that walk. And I have like, I mean, they sort of appear throughout poems because I sort of have like a history with pigeons. So when I was little, there were like these kids that lived in our neighborhood who were like throwing stones at a pigeon that had like a broken wing, and my dad saw them doing that, and he like yelled at them and then took the pigeon in, and he kept it in our garage until it could fly again. His name is Router. And so I had like a pet pigeon, sort of, like we kept him only long enough for him to be able to fly. And so yeah, they've like been a part of my life multiple times in a way. And one of the things I find really fascinating about them is one of the terms for pigeon is rock dove because they're like essentially the exact same bird as a dove. And if you think about like the way that we treat pigeons versus the way that we treat doves that we release for weddings, or that they represent peace, I think it's really interesting given that the major difference is that one of them is pure white and the other is every other color. This is a poem I wrote called I Find Myself Defending Pigeons. I love how you never find their bodies, how they never rest their eyes. I love how their breasts are comforters unfolding by their breath. I love that pigeons live in the city, that underestimation never stopped a pigeon from unlatching itself or being old. I want them all unspooling in the air, in bridges that are half sigh and half pigeon. I want to harbor their coo and utilize it for energy. I want to learn to use them the way they want to be used. I want to pigeon-tail into a quiet night, to let their oddness sit in our hands. You can never know a language until you quiet your own. I want people to write about them. They're leaving ships for land, or standing on their own on a marble statue in the shimmer of a field. I want to talk about the term rock dove, argue over whether or not it's imperialist. I want the media to implicate us in the pigeon problem, for a couple to sit with their asparagus and kids and realize none of this is far from them, whatever we think. I want oils and watercolors and inks. I want still life with pigeons, since not a one has ever been portrayed with soul. A flight of them around old bread. And how they're all the same. How all the world is here with them in hate, since they are rats adorned with angel wings. And the children down the street are free to chase their drag. They want to see a pigeon's rouge entirely. Let the pigeon have her pigment. Consider the pigeon's brown and green and everything. The brandishing of his nakedness to the sun, as if nothing is absolute. I love the pigeon's shoulders, tongues, and wedding nights. I love the pigeon's place in history, their obsession with living in the letters of our signs. I love their minds, or what I've come to believe is their theology. Who knows? Let the pigeons speak. Ask the closest pigeon for his number, for her middle name, if they are ready to die, if the sky gets crowded enough to consider war, if their stores are closed on Sundays. I want to be ready for them to be just like us, but more ready for them to be completely different. I don't want to waste any time tracing a pigeon's God to Abraham. I want to get started. Some of us feed pigeons. I love sometimes our care. I love, I think, the park bench. I love apples, but I do not love pears. The weather. I love the pigeons, the revolution of wheel to sky. I love the newspaper graying in a different air. Thank you all.